Okay, that was a good first try. I felt a little more like a kick than a punch, though.
It felt like a kick to me, too.
Your whole life, you've known that a foot can only kick. You've known that a foot cannot punch. Forget everything that you know. Much better. That felt like a punch. A very weak punch, but the most important thing is that you're learning to punch with your foot.
Welcome to Cut to Black, a Soprano sit-down.
And welcome to No Mercy, a Cobra Kai kickback.
My name is Jim Scampoli, and I've seen The Art of Self-Defense 3 times.
My name is Jacob Burrows, and if you're very confused, this is a crossover episode between our two podcasts where we usually talk about The Sopranos and related media, and Cobra Kai and related media. And this film, The Art of Self-Defense, that I've seen one times just now, before we are recording this, it's related to both, which is why we're dropping this on both feeds. Do you want to give us like a really brief rundown of what this film is and why we thought it would be great for listeners and viewers of both shows?
Well, I think I think the Cobra Kai comparison is very obvious, and I think it's very apt because it's like a dark I guess I don't want to say sarcastic, but I guess a dark, dry version of Cobra Kai, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's kind of scratching some of the same itches here, and just getting into this dark world of karate school. Who knew the underbelly of that? Speaking of underbelly, The Sopranos, more specifically the recent Many Saints of Newark. This is a film starring Alessandro Nivola, who did play Dickie Moltisanti in the Many Saints of Newark. So I think it's kind of a nice connection there to get a little bit into the range of this actor, because even the people that had kind of middling to negative feedback on Many Saints of Newark, I think most people were in full agreement that Alessandro is a great actor, great performance. So I had seen The Art of Self-Defense before I saw Many Saints of Newark, so I thought it would be interesting to discuss it in that light as we're discussing his performance here in this film. What do you say, Jacob? Does that wash? Does that make sense?
It does wash, I say. And if you so in very brief summary, like this film is about a wimp who is basically bullied in every aspect of his life, and then he finds karate, and that sort of becomes his new lifestyle. And there's a lot of very obvious Cobra Kai parallels, and a lot of there's not that many Sopranos parallels besides the actor there, but it is really interesting all the same.
You could get into, say, like, Sopranos explores masculinity, and especially masculinity maybe to a toxic extent. So you could kind of, I know that's a little bit more flimsy, but I think Alessandro is enough to make it work for Sopranos fans out there.
Yeah, and the film also stars Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots.
Yes.
Jesse Eisenberg, like, I was surprised that I guess he was in a film that I'd never heard of and that no one had ever seen, because he feels like a kind of like a big deal actor, and like this film got like a $2 million in the box office. I don't think it got like a wide release or anything, but it's just interesting that this totally passed me by. But did you watch this back when it came out? You were following this director, right?
I actually did see it. I wasn't following this director until this movie. I actually did see it in the theaters.
Okay.
I was lucky enough that it was playing near me, so I saw it. There's a somewhat off topic, but there's another movie that came out the same year, Vivarium, that has Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg in the lead roles as well, which is also another weird, interesting film. But yeah, that's just an aside. But yeah, Art of Self-Defense, it was just something I'd heard. Like, it was kind of getting some like indie buzz, I guess, and it happened to be playing at one of the smaller theaters near me. So I didn't know a ton about it, but I went to check it out. And I mean, I love it because it is kind of completely its own thing. And I don't know. I love the vibe, the humor, the darkness. And yeah, I think it's like it's its own thing that kind of keeps you guessing. You can compare it to a few things. You can compare it to the Cobra Kai, of course. You can compare it even to say like Fight Club or something along those lines, but it just has its own tone.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I would say it's kind of like Napoleon Dynamite meets Fight Club.
Yeah.
Or yeah, maybe some Wes Anderson vibes. Because a lot of the a lot of the acting is kind of like stilted, or like the way people talk is just not naturalistic at all.
Yeah.
And that sort of goes in hand with all the rest of how the film is put together as well. And I'm sure we'll get more into that, but basically it's a black comedy. That's what people call this genre, right? And Riley Stearns, the director, you've now seen his previous film before that, before this, from 2014, right? I mean, that is also kind of a dark comedy, right? So this seems to be sort of the area he moves in, unless that's a very different film. I don't know.
No, it's a similar style. You're right, and that movie is about a like a cult deprogrammer,
Mm-hmm.
and the parents of the actress in is Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who at the time were they married?
Yeah, they were married at
Yeah,
the time.
the director, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who you may know from Scott Pilgrim. She was Ramona Flowers, or she was in one of the Fargo seasons we watched. Was that the third season, I think?
Mm.
And she's in it, and she's like, this guy's trying to deprogram her, and things spiral as they do, as that job of being a cult deprogrammer it often does. He
Yeah.
also has this new movie coming out. It's going to be playing at Sundance next month, or depending on whenever this is up,
Duel?
whenever this goes up in the feed. Yeah, Duel, which sounds awesome as well. It's like about a person who's terminally ill, so to help their family, they have a clone made of themselves, but then they have a miraculous recovery, and they have to fight their clone to the death, because now that they're not dying anymore, they don't want their clone to take their life. With Aaron Paul, Jesse Eisenberg's in that as well, and Karen Gillian. So I know we're kind of jumping all around, but I feel like if you're a fan of Cobra Kai, if you're a fan of Sopranos, I mean, you like cool shit. And I feel like this guy makes cool shit if you're not familiar. These are things that I think you should put on your radar.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll talk about it sort of without spoilers until we get into maybe more of the
Yes.
plot of it. And we'll give you a spoiler warning then. But I also think his, well, this is the only film of his that I've seen, but you definitely should probably go in more or less blind. I watched like half the trailer and was like, this is a vibe that I know I'm going to enjoy. And I think that would probably be true for most people out there. If they watch the trailer, they'll either go, fuck yeah, I want to see that, or go, this is not for me. Because it's a very distinct style on display from the get-go.
And like
So-
you'd mentioned, kind of like the stilted, there's like, it's weird because like the stilted like line readings and the interactions, it feels like that would be something easy to do. It feels like, oh, that's easy. You just tell people to like act badly. But,
yeah.
but it's kind of like when you watch it, at least in my mind, I feel like that's way harder to do, because Jesse Eisenberg, I mean, whether you like or dislike him, people compare him to Michael Cera all the time. I think that's not fully fair. But he definitely has his own style. He does play that kind of nerdy, aloof, awkward guy. But in this movie, you have to like juggle it where he's a version of that, but also every character is a version of that to different extents, and still make it feel different, and make it feel like you get the idea of how the whole world is from these characters. And in my mind, I feel like that's hard to do. It's easy to make one guy who's an awkward nerd, like, oh, here's the awkward nerd. But when you're having him be an awkward nerd in an awkward, nerdy world, but he's especially nerdy, I don't know. I feel like that's tougher to do, and I think this pulls it off.
Yeah, and I don't know if what we're saying would even make sense if you
Yeah.
haven't watched it yet, to be honest. But as you're saying, the universe of this film is really interesting. You get a good sense of it in the first 10 minutes that the film, it doesn't deal in realism, or it's presenting early on that reality is kind of elastic, and you can assume from that it may go even further off the rails. And that's everything from in work in an office that's seemingly modern day. They still use like old school CRT computers and have porno magazines. It goes from that to like answering machines that subtly belittle you for your lack of messages, where it's like, you have no more messages. And like just the tone of it saying like everything in the world is kind of directed inwards at the character. Like the radio report, there's a radio report of a robbery, and it states that the police are advising everyone to carry guns or at least large knives. Like, and I know America is different than where I'm from, but I'm pretty sure even that is like not normal for being over there. So it's definitely a quirky vibe overall, not just the characters, but the whole world.
Yeah.
And in fact, our main character seems quite normal from the beginning in that sense, if, you know, aggressively boring and meek.
Yeah, and I mean, I could just point to the clip that we used to open it. It's because it's a joke, but it's also this joke that the world accepts is that you're gonna punch with your foot. So you're gonna you've only known how to kick, but now you're gonna punch with your foot rather than your fists. You're gonna unlearn everything, and it almost sounds like that's just something that would exist in the dojo or whatever because you have a
Yes.
weird sensei. But as the movie unfolds, you realize like, well, no, that's actually like a thing that's existing in the world, is that you're punching with your foot.
Yeah, medically we can determine that they're
Yeah.
actually punches, and there's definite sort of cult vibes. So like, again, we'll give a spoiler warning, but like, before we get into more specifics, but essentially, you know, he joins a dojo. It's weird. It's Fight Club vibes, and that's the case from the beginning. And going back to the way people were talking, like kind of felt like Napoleon Dynamite-ish, maybe Juno-ish. It's got that quirky, was this film made by an autistic person kind of mood to it. And yeah, just the way the characters talk to each other, it's just really appealing to my brain. And I don't necessarily think that I'm autistic, but my Swedish upbringing, it did instill in me an appreciation for direct styles of communication, which to a lot of people that I talk to in day-to-day life, I think comes off as robotic. And that's a lot of what's happening here. People are just sort of directly stating things, but you're right. You'd think that would be easy, but like there's also a full range of human emotion underneath these super stilted conversations, which is what it must be so difficult to do, because you're acting in a way that's not like the way a normal person would act ever, but the universe of the scene, everyone just sort of accepts it and display the full emotions related to whatever's happening underneath in relation to that. So it's again, but at the same time, I think a lot of people would watch this and go, like, even after watching the whole film, would go, what the hell was the point of that? And I think the main question is whether the comedy, which comes from the mood more than any punchlines, whether it works for you or not. And as you were saying, you love the comedy of it immediately, which is all about this weird kind of setting that the world is in, and so did I. But I could see how someone would watch this and go like, absolutely not, no thank you.
Yeah, fair enough. I could see that as well. And yeah, and it's such a fine line, like when you're, again, going back to kind of the direct nature of the conversations and the way people act. It's such a fine line from just being like too over the top a goof. And like you said, there's enough behind it. There is a range of emotions that are there to keep it like right there to make it work, at least in my opinion. And I, like, plot wise, there's not things that are like super surprising. Like, you know, you can kind of see a few things coming, but it's not really about that. Like, as far as plot points, it's still like, even if you know, because there's kind of like I don't want to say a swerve or a twist or anything, but you know, there's a development to the story that you kind of have a hunch at the beginning, but you still don't quite know where things are going. Like the movie, even though you kind of can see where maybe the story beats are going to be, it's still hard to gauge where it's going. And I think that's what still keeps it in a range of like, I like, this isn't anything I've really seen before. So I'm still on my toes on like where it's going to go and how it's going to come about. I don't mean to speak so vague, but again, we're keeping it a little spoiler free at the beginning. We'll get more into the specifics. But we're just kind of talking about the feel and the vibe of the movie. initially here.
Yeah. And when it comes to sort of the cast and the characters, I think that's something we can chat about before getting into details. And Jesse Eisenberg, I think, does a fine job in this, and as does Imogen Poots. But I think Alejandro Nivola is probably the most interesting actor, both from the Sopranos standpoint and because he's essentially Johnny from Cobra Kai, like so there's a few scenes in this where Jesse Eisenberg's character, whose name is Casey, and Alejandro's character is just called Sensei. So for a start, you can already see that connection. But it's very clear from when Casey enters this dojo that this Sensei has dedicated his life to this. He has a picture of his master on the wall. And the master has like a rainbow belt that he invented himself because he defeated all the other grand masters in the state and is now declared himself to have the level above black belt, which is rainbow belt, and everything is like deadly serious. They have these rules on the wall, which again, Cobra Kai-esque. It's like 11 rules or whatever, which maybe we'll have to pull up and go through, but like there's a lot of comedy to it, but there's a lot of scenes that are very similar to Cobra Kai and like Johnny and Miguel, where Sensei is saying to Casey that like, what is your favorite kind of music? And he talks about I don't know, some sort of pulp or what have you, and he's like, no, it's metal. You like metal now. And it is a film about toxic masculinity. It's like all the things of Cobra Kai, like honestly dialed up to 11 in that he immediately becomes a dick, similar to what we see, I guess, in like season 1 of Cobra Kai, or even the Karate Kid, in how you can instill these values and like fucking turn it up to a ridiculous volume of having Sensei transform someone who is a complete wimp and a pushover into being absurdly in the other direction through things like making sure he listens to the right music. Oh, you have an interest in France and French people. No. They're known as surrenderers. You need to be interested in a powerful country like Russia, maybe Germany. And then he starts learning German instead and is speaking German to people and punching people, etc., etc.
What I love about that is because that's part of the same conversation where he's asking about the music he likes, and he says like some sort of like easy listening pop or something like that, and he's like, well, no, you like metal now. And then he goes, do you have any other interests or hobbies in addition to your newfound love of metal?
Yeah.
The way it's worded is, well, because metal is the most masculine and aggressive thing, and then that leads to France, and he's like, no, you need to like masculine things. And what I like about both this, Cobra Kai, and even to an extent the Sopranos, is, at least the way I read it, and even something like Fight Club, for example, like, I think a lot, I mean, there's obviously, if you're on social media and stuff like that, there's always a lot of talk about toxic masculinity, and I think sometimes people use it as a crutch where they kind of just brand masculinity in general as toxic masculinity. And maybe this is the wrong read. Maybe my read is incorrect. But I do feel like there's a level of, at least the way the world works, and whatever it is built into like how men are and masculinity in general, where if you don't have enough, that's bad. Like, because we see, whether it be Casey here or even Miguel or whatever, like, you can't just let people walk over you, because then the world is not a good place. And so you'll just be taken advantage of and bad things will happen. And then there's a level you can reach where it's just like standing up for yourself, or just kind of being assertive to just live your life. And then there's this complete crazy level that you could go to where, yes, you walk into it. Well, you karate chop your boss in the throat because you have tits on your screen. You have tits on your monitor, and you're flipping through like porno mags or whatever it is. And you're challenging people to do push-ups and asserting yourself as the alpha. But I do feel like these when we explore these things, there's kind of at least a hint that there's a level of like, there's an okay way to be where you're not messing with other people, but you're also not letting yourself be a doormat. It's just the problem is when you go too far in either way, that's when things get messy or I guess problematic, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean, in real life, I think that's what a lot of people would get out of martial arts, which is
Yeah.
less about being able to fight people and more about, feeling physically fit. I see, I'm not speaking from experience, but this is what I assume. Like feeling physically fit and confident in who you are and confident in your body, whether that's through going to the gym or other activities that sort of instill you with that inner confidence or inner peace if you're going down the Miyagi-Do kind of route, which is sort of a similar way of doing it, but on the other side. But yeah, at the same time, some of the people who like might be pushovers and experience the world poorly because of that, probably the reason they're having a bad time is that so many people are overcompensating for being pushovers themselves and become assholes, and that's kind of the cycle that we see in this film as well.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of great stuff. What do you think of the performance as Sensei and how it relates, I guess? Because, like Nivola, I don't remember seeing him in lots of things like as a main guy. I know he was in he has been a lot of stuff like Face Off, even going all the way back to Face Off, which I would never put the two together.
Same here. I didn't really make that connection until they started marketing more the Many Saints of Newark, and then they were showing that clip where he's Pollux Troy, like Castor's brother or whatever from Face Off, which I haven't seen in a while, but seeing him in it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. And he's just kind of it's one of those like, crazy careers that happen where like this guy's just been kind of doing great work in these kind of thankless roles for a long time. So it's really cool. I mean, maybe he's been on other people's radars. I'm just being honest from my point of view that between seeing this movie and then Many Saints of Newark, I'm like really psyched that he feels like he's getting these, more starring roles and getting more of the spotlight because he's clearly a talented dude. And I like, especially, I think the other connection between like Many Saints of Newark and Art of Self-Defense is he really is good at kind of having like an intensity to him, but he can show that there's a vulnerability there as well, and that there's something behind it. And obviously, I think that's why they cast him in Many Saints of Newark, because that's absolutely what Gandolfini was like masterful at, and we're kind of hitting the same type of vibes. This is a little bit different because it's more like stoic sensei, but you always get the vibe that he's putting this on a bit and he's like lucked into this role. Like I'd be so interested, I hate prequels, but I would almost love to see the path of sensei to where he's at now and with his grandmaster. But I love to just even play with that idea in my head, because you can almost see a little of that in the performance and in just the way he acts in the scenes. And I feel like even though he's kind of, he's the villain, he's a a Johnny or even like a Kreese to an extent. I feel like there's some tragedy to it, because I feel like he takes notice of Casey, because he says this in the movie, but I think it's so true, is that he probably does see a lot of himself in Casey, and he thinks he's helping him in a twisted, bizarre way.
Yeah, and he he believes in what he's selling as well, even though like to anyone else where we end up getting in the film is kind of absurd. We're kind of skirting around details, so maybe we'll give a spoiler warning here in a second, but I did want to say that one of the reviews I saw is sort of called this film a good calling card for the director. And I think what you were just saying is that that's also true on the acting front, as far as like showing that mix of, well, yeah, kind of toxic masculinity is what a lot of what The Sopranos is about as well, or that intensity with an undercurrent of someone who's deeply wounded or insecure or just looking for connection. As far as the director, I think it's a good description because the film is very competently put together. It's kind of a good proof that he knows what he's on about. It's not, to me, to be honest, like the most memorable standalone film, because the plot, the sequence of events, isn't really realistic enough to stick out. It'll stick out in my memory like, oh, that was fucking crazy and funny and everything, but it might not have a deep emotional resonance, because it's kind of like a Wes Anderson film in that sense, in that it's like things happen and you enjoy the ride, but it's not necessarily going to have a payoff that's like, whoa, what an amazing payoff. I don't know. It's clearly a film that feels more like indie art rather than film for the sake of making a profit, which is rare in itself and kind of nice. And it feels like, because this is, oh yeah, it's not his first feature film, but it does feel like, you know, the way filmmakers, when they're coming up, they'll make short films, go around to festivals and whatever. It feels more like an extension of that rather than a massive leap into the film industry. And I think that the director is sort of transitioning a little bit, making slightly bigger films. And this film called Duel, which I only realized was a kind of a play on words as we were talking about it, because it's dual as in two people, one of whom is a clone of the other one. It feels like they're becoming more high concept, and he's really sort of finding the voice of the stories that he likes to tell, and it's very distinct. So yeah, I definitely go watch it. I think if any of this sounds interesting, but should we give a big spoiler warning and just get into the details of it?
Sure. And yeah, just to add on to that about it being like a calling card, I think that's pretty apt, because I feel like this on the page would be a tougher sell on the vibe. And I think it's a proof of concept where he has a specific vision or a voice, and he can then kind of execute that well, because I feel like this would be a little bit tougher sell if it was just, I mean, outside of the indie world, like, I mean, not that it's like a huge studio would make this either way, but like if you walked in, like someone started reading this, I don't know. I think it'd be hard to get the vibe across, but it just shows that he has this in his head and he could easily put it out there, more so than say, like, not to pick on Marvel movies, but like, you know, where a director comes in and makes a Marvel movie and they don't really have to do much because it's already kind of decided. But yeah, let's get into more of the specifics on the plot points. Like Jacob said, I think if you haven't seen it, I think you'd be better off just going and watching it and then coming back and listening to the rest of the discussion, because I do think it helps to go in as cold as possible, because I think it's a fun unraveling.
Yeah. And you know, we won't necessarily go through all the beats, but at the same time, this story is pretty straightforward too. Like in some ways, because it's just slowly building towards where it's getting. And this is your spoiler warning. We're going to get into spoilers now, but it sort of starts out with just depicting Casey as an absolute wimp in his daily life. And he's obviously not happy with it in his work and everything. And it's about like, 5 to 10 minutes in, we see him get just randomly attacked by some people.
Well, I do want to call out the opening sequence. It's kind of like an obvious joke. Yeah. But the way it's done is, I love it.
Because I kind of wanted to bring that up as well, even though it's so, go on.
Because we kind of open on just like this French couple coming into a diner, and they're just kind of shit talking everything. So I guess it is also another, like, how we talk about how the French are cowards. But they're kind of just shit talking the diner in general. Like, oh, look at this, like all these, everything looks terrible. And then Jesse Eisenberg sitting there having coffee or what have you, his breakfast. And they look at him and they just start like making up a backstory for him and how pathetic he is. Oh, he's like reading the papers. So it's like how pathetic he is. And he's like, he's ashamed to even take a piss because his dick's so small. But they're talking in French, but then he gets in his car and puts the tape in, and he's on the advanced tape of French and the tape even has to say, like, at this point, you have a clear understanding of French.
And I kind of mixed this up with a later scene because I thought it cut to him just crying in the car, but no, he's still putting up that front of like, this is fine, I'm okay with my life, before everything kind of breaks down. Because later there's a scene where some stuff happens and then he's in the car and he's just crying and everything after he gets intimidated by a guy in a parking lot, I think. But that's a wholly different thing.
Yeah, and it's because it's a play on. I mean, I've talked about this on my other show before. Is that the ultimate dream, or actually, my theory is the only reason why you learn a foreign language is the ultimate dream is you'll be somewhere and someone will be talking shit about you, and you'll know what they're saying, but then so you could call them out on it. But
Yeah.
what's great here is that he knows what they're saying, and he just pretends he doesn't.
I mean, that's such a scene
Yeah.
from a movie, right? That you'd
Yeah.
actually like, oh, you don't expect the white guy to know Arabic or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that's such a thing. I've also seen like it's also there's something inherently satisfying in it. I've seen, you know, TikToks or whatever where it's someone who is just a random guy who speaks however many languages and will just go into places, different Asian shops, and like just to see people's reaction when they hear someone being able to communicate. But he doesn't do that. He just goes off. He just takes it, and that is his life basically in the office. Break room. That's the exact same thing. He just has to take it, where he's just there talking and he's trying to engage and be a responsible human being, but everything is just kind of shit. And yeah, then he does get beaten up and mugged.
Yeah.
By some people on some motorbikes, some mysterious individuals.
And he's trying to secretly learn, I guess, how to be a man, because he takes like the men's magazine from the guys in the break room that seem like, you know, he's not good enough to be in their group and they don't understand him. He's trying to kind of connect, but he takes it. It's hilarious because then he makes a photocopy of every page. and you know, he's flipping through it. One of them is Wolf, a pet for a man. And of course there's like breasts, and you know, he's trying to learn. And then yeah, he's got this cute little like wiener dog, or is it a dachshund? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And yeah, his dog needs food, but it's nighttime. You know, you can't go out at night. That's where scary things happen. And he's kind of right, because he gets robbed and beaten, and he's in the hospital. And you know, it's even just kind of exploring, you know, post trauma. Like you're already kind of a meek person in the world, and then when someone even kind of proves your fears right, everything gets emphasized even more. So then he tries to get a gun, and there's some funny goofs there where the guys, like the gun salesman's even telling him bad things about guns. Like, you don't have kids, do you? Oh, good, because statistically, it's way more likely for a kid to be killed when a gun's in the home. Also, if it's for self-defense, I mean, statistically, a person is more likely to be shot and killed in a robbery if they have a gun. But then, of course, he has to deal with the gun laws. They're not letting him have the gun immediately. We have to hold it for you or whatever for a waiting period. So then he seeks out some other, self-defense, and that's when he stumbles upon the dojo.
Yeah. I love the scene where he's trying to buy a gun, and the guy just kind of has a purple shirt that just has a little gun embossed on it.
Yeah.
And like the conversation and the way it goes, where he's like, I'd like something I'd be able to hold in my hand. And he's like, sounds like you're looking for a handgun. And then gives it to him, and Jesse Eisenberg picks it up and is like, yes, this is exactly what I want. It fits in my hand quite easily. A lot of like, again, this is still just the first 10 minutes, and it's us really getting a sense for how skewed this world is, because yes, he's very weird to be making photocopies of this magazine, but it's weird that they have a magazine to begin with. It's weird that the office even has a photocopier almost, but that's just kind of part of the beige, brown, earthy toned world that we're in, similar to when he goes to buy the dog food and it's just in a big paper bag that says dog food on it without any brand or anything like that. And I like, are unsalted potato chips a thing, by the way? Because later on when he grabs loads of stuff, I was pausing to look at all the different stuff he was grabbing, and like one of the bags is like unsalted potato chips, and I was like, that sounds perfect for this world.
Oh yeah, I don't think so. I would almost wonder though if there's some weird health brand that would do that, but yeah, I don't think so. But that's great.
No, so I was looking for little things like that, because I was seeing how the the style of the shop and everything, that was giving me major sort of Wes Anderson. Here's a shot of a shelf and him coming in and grabbing the thing, very symmetrical, down the middle. But yeah, then we get to the dojo, as you were saying, and there's a lot of good kind of speeches or like impartments of wisdom in this film, where Sensei's talking about various things. But like the first one we see is him talking about how karate is a language, and he's like punching the air as he's answering. And this is in the trailer if you've seen that. But it's great how these things are always like vaguely nonsensical, but then he's also like good at fighting. So everyone's just kind of like, this is incredibly deep.
Yeah, because he's talking about how like karate is his communication. So when someone's like, what are you going to do later? He's doing the punches to, I was thinking of renting a movie, and it's so great. And yeah, he's kind of just sitting back, taking this all in. And, you know, you don't blame him. He's much like a Daniel LaRusso, or even, well, I guess Miguel didn't really kind of see a dojo in action, but you know, you see these people, they're up there, they're confident, they're strong, they're disciplined. I want a piece of that, right? What could go wrong?
Exactly. So he signs up for classes, shows up, meets what's her name? Who is the teacher played by
Imogen
Poots,
Poots.
Anna. Yeah,
Yes.
Anna, who is sort of training the children during the day and learns some more of the dojo rules. But also, like, throughout this, there's hints that there's like weird stuff here, even weirder than the rest of the world, because there's like blood stains on the mat. There's talk of like the night class, very ominously. And when he eventually signs up after his first lesson, he's like taken to the supply room and is told like, this is off limits, this is you can't come in here.
Yeah, there's some
and so on.
intrigue, there's some mystery going on. Like there's a little bit more to this place than just a karate dojo. I do have the Dojo Rules.
Okay.
And also I guess a bit of trivia is that Riley Stearns, the writer director, he does train and teach Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Interesting.
So I guess it's inspired for some real life stuff here. So Dojo Rules: no shoes on the mat. Number 1, of course, no shoes on the mat. Number 2, no food or drinks on the mat, of course. Number 3, bow when stepping on or off the mat. Number 4, always bring your belt. Number 5, wash your gi. Number 6, respect your opponent. Number 7, tap or hear it snap. Or number 8, tap or take a nap. Which we do learn in the children's lesson, tap or take a nap. Number 9, stay hydrated. Number 10, if it works, use it. And of course, number 11, which like is newly added, like you can see it's like separated from the rest, is guns are for the weak.
Yeah. And that line, like, if it works, use it. I feel like as we're recording this, we're waiting for season 4 of Cobra Kai to come out. That's like said outright, more or less in the trailer when they're talking about how to blend the different styles, and everyone gets hung up on using this style or the other, but really whatever works in a fight, you should be using it. A lesson that Jesse Eisenberg's character takes to heart towards the end of the film. But he gets promoted to a yellow belt, and it's because he does embrace the karate lifestyle. He's not even in work at this time. He's still home from work after his injuries, so he's just full time doing karate shit. Gets a yellow belt, buys all yellow stuff in the store because he's crazy, and stuff like that. But then, yeah, he sort of is intimidated by someone in the parking lot and still isn't someone who would like punch or push someone else around. So this is where he cries in the car, and Sensei can kind of sense that he needs a little push, a little something, and takes him under his wing, more or less here, and talks to him about heavy metal and stuff like that. And then after that, he becomes a total asshole who punches his own boss in the face and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's where because he starts surrounding himself with aggressive things, like everything's aggressive. But yeah, he takes that to too much of an extreme, because like again, it's like an extension of how we just saw him buy everything yellow because he's really like he's finally, to his defense, he's finally found something like a belonging. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, not to get like too dark here, but it's, it's similar to people talk about like racist hate groups or whatever and how they like are building online.
Yeah.
A lot of times it does come down to some sad, lonely person, and you finally found a community and you feel like you belong somewhere, and now you're gonna like rep it to the fullest extent that you can. So initially it just starts out with loving loving everything yellow, but then he doesn't feel it yet until he starts listening to metal and and really being aggressive about everything, where he does alpha at work. Like, it works to be at least be in the break room group now, which who would even want to be in that group? But he's able to alpha one of the guys and take his seat and let's do push-ups, but it's because he karate chopped the boss in the throat, which it does feel like at least the boss was kind of friendly to him. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we see hints earlier where he's like, "Hey, don't worry, you got plenty of vacation time. Maybe you should go to France, like you've been talking about." And I think they did mention that the boss had a party that he
Yeah.
had gone to, and that's where he got the gift certificate from, like stuff like that. But it's almost like the one kind of friend he didn't realize he had. He fucks up, and now he's full on dojo guy. Now he's self defense guy.
Yeah, and one of the earliest, well, one of the very obvious early hints that even though this is maybe instilling confidence, this place, this community probably isn't overall good. We get a sense of it because Sensei is very obviously against Anna getting a black belt or getting any type of advancement because she is a woman. And there's a lot of fun and very misogynistic talk about it. But this leads to someone else gets promoted to black belt, and once Jesse Eisenberg's character Casey is invited to the night class and sees that, like, I was honestly like, night class, what is it gonna be, right? And it's essentially just well, at first it's essentially just fighting, all out fighting, and we see Anna just beats the shit out of the person who did get the black belt, and it's a scene completely like lifted more or less from Fight Club with, I wanted to destroy something beautiful, where she's just punching him over and over even though he's out, because she has obviously not had a chance to, like, this is her only place that she belongs as well, except she's completely and totally pushed down in it, even though she should be, second in command or what have you. So,
And also similar to Hawk vibes when
yeah,
Hawk beats the shit out of that big bully kid.
yeah.
Where it's like, we're getting to the more extreme now. We're not just sparring anymore. This is the night class, and even I guess the rules don't apply because he's tapping and no one's stepping in, and she's not letting go of the hold. And yes, then he's out and she's bashing his face in, much like like Fight Club. And we also see that Henry, who was kind of like a schlubby dude that's been helping Casey initially, like teaching him in the locker room, like what's going on with the belts and what the stripes mean. He's of course now jealous of Casey because Casey's clearly getting kind of if not special treatment, he's caught the eye of Sensei, and everyone wants Sensei's attention. Casey's moved up to yellow belt, so Henry's still above him because he's a blue belt, but Casey gets invited to the night class, which Henry is not, so he decides to just show up anyways, which is not a good idea because Sensei does a good job of not like showing that he's annoyed until making Henry feel it by he has this little speech about an elbow, like, oh, an elbow only goes one way. That's what makes it an elbow. That's the strength of it. And then he fucking pushes his elbow the other way and kicks him out of the class, tells him he doesn't want to see him here ever again. So there's a darkness to this dojo, and you don't want to get on Sensei's bad side.
Yeah, and when they finish fighting, everyone just takes all their clothes off and starts massaging each other. And Casey's a little bit like, huh? And Then Sensei brings him out to like, oh no, we'll do a special thing with you because it's your first time. And they're in a corridor, and you're very like, I think it's obviously like building up like weird shit is happening here, and you're supposed to feel a bit unsure about what's gonna happen next. But with the super culty vibes, you can't help but think, yeah, Sensei's taking him off to have sex with him, and that's gonna be his initiation. At least that's what I thought.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, Anna's story, I mean, obviously she represents, I mean, she's like the only female character for the most part, besides of like extras or something. So I mean, it's clear what she represents. Like, she's almost there just to prove it to everyone else that you're not going to win. Like, she's not going to leave, because even though she should leave, and like, what does it matter? Like, you don't need to prove anything to any of these people, especially Sensei, but it's almost like, well, fuck them, I'm going to anyways. And yeah, I mean, we hear like there's the whole sexual vibe potentially with Sensei, and then there's also this vibe of, because he's like, just think that all the other guys have done this as well, and then she's just in a like storage locker, so it's almost like, oh my god, is he gonna make her have sex with Anna? Is that what's happening instead? So, and of course then we hear her like story of how that came to be, is that she did hold back in class, and then someone did try to sexually assault her, and she fucking killed him. There's a lot of like, you don't expect going in that a lot of these people have bodies under their belt. Like, there's some murders that happen in this movie. But yeah, I don't know. It's just everything gets played out pretty well, and I like her kind of arc, or what she represents, because it just kind of tells that story of like, well, I don't care how kind of nothing these people are, I'm going to prove them wrong. But one of the funniest lines in the movie is when Sensei says, I've now realized that her being a woman will forever stand in the way of her being a man.
Yeah. Yeah, because when he brings Casey to this boiler room or whatever, he's like, I'm so sorry that you have to cool down with her. I know, a woman's hands are not as strong, so it won't be as effective of a cool down. So he really just wants her to massage him, and him to massage her after the fighting, and that's it. And this is kind of where, even though they've met previously, obviously, because she was teaching the kids when he first arrived, they've met, but this is sort of where they're isolated together and have a conversation and get to know each other a little bit more, and that sort of progresses as he gets more deeply into the dojo culture. And then it's only a little bit further on that everything starts to go to shit, because Casey's still so into it that he got a yellow belt made, like, for his actual pants. He has a belt now, and he got like 50 of them, and they're different colors for everyone in the dojo to wear. And this is the sort of like, it's a nice thing, but it's their belts are so important to them. It's so part of who they are, and being able to wear them out in the wide world is just such an emotional thing for all of them, that they're so odd with him coming up with this idea. And he's also, I think he says he was fired, right, or had to quit because he did punch his boss in the throat and all of that. So he also gets hired to do like part-time accounting. But then again, it's only a little bit later that Sensei calls him, tells him he knows where one of the people who beat him up is. They go out, and he here's like where everything gets bad, right? Because he's told, this is the guy, he fucked you up, fuck him up. It's clearly not this person. There's no reason to think that it is, other than he has such a deep trust for Sensei at this point. He's the one who's given him all this confidence and everything. So he just beats this innocent man, and is filmed by Sensei. So that's now on videotape. So that's weird. And then he goes home, and his dog is dead.
Yes.
And they go to the hospital, and the doctor's explanation is incredibly funny. But when he just talks about how, like, it's so weird, never seen anything like it. It's like he's been kicked. He's definitely been kicked to death, but it has the impact of a punch. And I never thought this would come back as like a plot point, but
it's so great.
Yeah. So he's kind of entrapped. He wants to, like, obviously at this point say fuck this dojo, fuck all of this. He's no longer in on it. He goes there, he breaks all the rules in one go, eats on the mat, walks with shoes on the mat, and says fuck you and fuck your dojo. And it's kind of fun and good, but he can't defeat Sensei. Sensei is stronger than him, defeats him at a fight, and then also reminds him that he has video of him just beating someone up. So you better just stay and do as you're told, and like you're my little prodigy now. And then there's one of the other funniest lines in the film where he says that there are some things that women and men do together, like ride a tandem bicycle or have sex. But even then, men ride a tandem bicycle to please the woman, and with sex, it's the other way around. And he's basically saying, other than those two activities, men and women should be separate.
And back to the belts real quick. It's so funny because it's one thing to wear like a yellow belt or a blue belt, but like the fact that he's just wearing a black belt, but he's acting like it's different is so funny. Or even the other guy that's wearing a brown belt, because obviously you can easily get brown or black belts. And he's like, wow, wearing my brown belt in the world is just so much better. But yes, there's this push and pull because, Sensei is still stronger than him. And he does have, the video evidence. But Sensei's still kind of denying stuff that's happened. And he's still kind of keeping Casey in the loop. But I mean, they just keep amping things up because now we get the reveal clearly like, oh my God, you're a motorcycle gang and we're going around to beat people up. Kind of like what happened to me when I was beaten up by a motorcycle gang, which is weird because I guess in this world, you could almost still see that is Casey not putting it together because it's not till later. Then he even has to see that there's a VHS tape that they're selling of him getting the shit kicked out of him. I guess they're selling that on the black market or what have you to even like reinforce it more. I guess the reveal there too is that he basically could have been killed if it wasn't for Anna, who did kind of at least save his life, because at that point, Thomas, I believe, is the one who becomes the black belt over Anna when he's clearly not as good as her. He wants to get his is it the red stripe?
Yeah,
because stripe. Yeah, Henry makes what we think is a joke. He's like, haha, no, of course it's not. The red stripe's not for killing someone, but it is. And when it gets to the point where Casey, I guess, do they count that? Oh no, they don't count that death. They don't count the guy that's on the bike. It's the cop here who's like apparently an undercover cop. They're aware of these robberies that are happening. And when Casey and Anna roll up on him for their night of, motorcycle gang mischief, Anna gets grazed in the leg with a gun, and then Casey beats a cop to death, so he gets his stripe. And but Sensei's so proud because he's like, oh my God, a yellow belt who has a red stripe. This is unprecedented. This is amazing.
Yeah, and I do think, it's clear from when we see the motorbikes that these are the people who beat him up. But there's still, it's clear that that's the case, but he's partially indoctrinated. He's partially entrapped because they have incriminating videos of him doing stuff. So even just that sliver of a chance that this is not what's happening, even though it's clearly what's happening, is, I think, enough for him to, because he does try to back out. He's like, I can't do this. And the only reason he fights the policeman is that Anna is shot in the leg and they might be killed, and he has all this testosterone he doesn't know what to do with, so he fights this guy, ends up killing him, and now he's obviously even more even deeper, and this is when he finds out Anna's backstory, as you mentioned a while back as well.
I put that a little too early. That's right, it doesn't come up till here.
But
then we also see that Casey's power is growing because he kicks a truck tire and flattens it.
Oh yeah, he's getting very strong. And then when he gets home, he has a more masculine dog, German Shepherd. That's very clearly left by Sensei, which is also very clearly admitting we did kill your dog. So Casey goes and investigates the dojo, finds a lot of information, like a lot of people are paying. They're paying for membership even after they've left. I don't know. There was a picture of Sensei with a woman or something that I thought was going to be important, but I can't really. I don't
Yeah,
remember if that.
they kind of don't show you that, but I guess from what I take from it is that's maybe where he learns his name, because we find
Ah,
out later that he learns his name. But yeah, because I hadn't seen it in a while, and I was like, oh yeah, like what is the picture? And I kind of like that they just leave it, like they leave it as something where, again, they always just kind of hint at what Sensei, like what brought Sensei to be how he is now. And you could, I guess, infer that he was once married or in some sort of serious relationship, and maybe that's where all this bitterness and turmoil has built from. Not to blame whatever his spouse is, but just to say, like, it led him down this path apparently. But I do take from it that maybe that's where he learned what his real name is.
yeah. And then, of course, he discovers that there's a bunch of VHS tapes that are being packaged and sold. Faces of Fists, Volume 13. And it's basically snuff films and other
Yeah.
ultra violence that they're just selling. And then when Sensei has you on tape doing some extreme violence, you're entrapped and can't really get out. Maybe you can get out if you're still paying fees or whatever. But yeah, so like now there's absolutely no doubt. So the only question is, what is he actually going to do about it at this point? Because he's just as entrapped as anyone else. And then
And
we have
then
kind of
we
an interesting.
oh, go ahead. We might be
Um,
talking about the same thing here, but we do
yeah.
see, because when Casey first is kind of snooping around the dojo after hours, learning about it, we kind of just see the hint that he sees something in the locker room. We just kind of see it kind of somewhat in frame. And what we find later is Henry had hung himself, and he hung himself with his blue belt, and even with his broken arm, he got a blue cast. So he's very easily, like, Casey. I mean, that could have been Casey, because Henry also was a guy that came to and embraced, and even after being kicked out and seriously injured, he still got his cast blue. That's how much of a blue belt he was.
Yeah.
But apparently it was too much because he committed suicide in the dojo. And then we learned that, like, the dojo even has a fucking
Incinerator.
yeah, an
Yeah.
incinerator to
Yeah.
just burn them up.
But this is where I did get a little confused, because when Casey comes in, we don't really see what he's looking at. So I
Yeah,
didn't really register what was happening.
yeah.
I thought it was just a training doll or something. Maybe I was zoned out. And then later on, when he's hanging there, I was like, oh, did Sensei do this? I wasn't sure, because I'm also like, he would have to get in and everything. Although, I mean, Casey can get in, but I was just like, oh, did he kill himself? Because now it seems, because they're sort of stacking all of these different reveals. So when they're also showing, hey, we do snuff films and we have an incinerator to burn bodies, and here is a dead body, I'm like, so clearly they killed him, right? And then it's like, no, he actually killed himself. And you're like, this feels a bit muddled with the amount of stuff happening at the same
Yeah.
time. But either way, it's very clear that Casey's like, what the fuck? And as I think you mentioned, we see Anna is the one who saves him from actually being murdered at the start of the film, because she says, "I can hear sirens. Women's ears are tuned to much higher pitches than men's," and like that's the only reason they would listen to her or believe her, is because they're like, "Ah, yes, women are inferior. You're right. Let's go." So
What
yeah.
to go back a little bit to what I love also about the Henry reveal is, because then, yeah, you're right. Like, I think it is something that plays a little bit better on, say, a second viewing, like, since I'd seen it before, because it is, you don't see what Casey's looking at, and then you're right, there's a bunch of reveals and things happening, and then we kind of come back to it when Sensei shows up at the dojo. But what I love about it is he doesn't really react at all, and he just drags his body over the incinerator and he incinerates it. And then they follow that up with him just doing mundane activities, like he's vacuuming the mat, he's cleaning the it's like, oh, just another day opening the dojo, burning a body and just cleaning toilets and shit like that. And also, in a weird way, like, before we come to this climactic ending here, is it takes the air out of Sensei's image a bit because we're just
Yeah.
seeing him doing bullshit. So I just kind of like that sequence of events and how it plays out here.
Yeah. And then it turns out that, well, Casey was there the whole time. He comes up and sits on the mat next to him when he's sort of praying to his sensei, and just tells him he's going to kill him, and does a lot of talking, but essentially just challenges him to a fight to the death, because we were told early in the film that his master went around challenging other masters to a fight to the death, and he killed them with this one technique that he never taught anyone else, where he punched his index finger through their skulls and thereby killed them. And this is one of the best payoffs of something
good.
like that. It is amazing.
Before the payoff, I do love the shot of Sensei kneeling to his grandmaster, because this plays out, at least this build up here is just something you'd see in a kung fu movie or something like that. Like, and even though Casey's upset and we'd seen that he was like going against the rules before, here he does take his shoes off. He's not eating on the mat. And it's like kind of, you have like this, I guess, the sunrise coming in through the windows of the dojo, and Casey kneels behind him. And it's the classic, like, I'm going to kill you. I'm challenging you to a duel to the death in unarmed combat. And it's such a great setup to then, I guess, fucking Chekhov's gun appears, literally, where he just shoots him in the fucking head.
Yeah, and it's so good, back with the guy with the gun, that he says like your paperwork's going to be valid for another 6 months if you want to get it, but that's just a joke, but it all comes together. I think this scene also has like a great example of what we're talking about with the way they're talking, where he's like calls him Leslie, and then like, that's right, I found out your real name is Leslie. And then in a normal film it would stop there, but then he's like, I called you that to make you angry. And it's like so much of stating the obvious things that you're doing in a complete deadpan way. That is very amusing to me. And he, states that, when you think about it, Leslie is a lot more feminine sounding than Casey. And like all this stuff that's completely obvious. But yeah, he challenges him to unarmed combat and then shoots him in the head. And then I don't remember the cut exactly, but it's pretty much we just go after he does. Basically, he walks up. You expect him to do maybe some kind of one-liner. I expected him to say, if it works, use it, which is one of the rules of the dojo. So he was following the rules. But no, he does what's much better, a much more extreme version of what I just said, of stating the obvious, of saying, I've been thinking a lot about what to say when I killed you. And he just talks for a while about how he had two options. He's going to say both of them so he does not second-guess himself later. And he basically has two one-liners or something. I forget what they actually are, but I do remember him going like, yeah, I took some time to think about what I would say when I would kill you.
Oh yeah, one of them is like, you would say that since I used a gun to kill you, that would make me a weaker man, and undoubtedly that's true. But I would argue that you're weaker because like you're now dead, something like that. And then he uses the line from the action movie when he says, I didn't play by the rules. So yeah, that's right. He gets to do both in a very elongated, awkward way, which is like a perfect capper to what the movie's been doing. And then he's kind of walks off frame and or he kneels down off frame and we hear like squishing noise. And we find out that he tells the rest of them that he used Grandmaster's ancient move of punching through his skull with his index finger, which is great because the weird thing is, in a world where you can punch with your feet, potentially Grandmaster could have really had this move. But I also like to think that Casey just figured out this probably was Grandmaster's move. And the same things played out. And it's even more amazing, like thinking about it or like pulling up the clip real quick, is that Sensei is still just dead on the mat, but all the students are there.
Yeah. Well, they're the nighttime students, the night class students. They have all, well, they haven't all killed people actually, but yeah, they've been around dead bodies. But yeah, it's absurd. I completely had that read as well, that all of this is built on a sham that he was going around shooting karate masters in the head, and now he's done the same thing to take over the class and restore honor to its students. Which is the thing he says outright to Sensei, that that's not why he's doing it. He's doing it because I hate you. I hate you, Sensei. He examines their hands and determines which one of them killed his dog, which is Trevor, the one that attacked. Sorry, is it Trevor?
Thomas.
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 Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, he's the one that he got the black belt over Anna, and he also was the one on video that wanted to kill Casey at the time because he wanted to get his stripe. And yeah, he's apparently the one that killed the dog because he does have a dog bite. Because we did learn that the dog put up a fight, which was, harrowing and sad to hear. But
yeah, and so he's killed by the new dog, the new masculine dog. And then Casey takes out a black belt, gives it to Anna, and Anna's like, "Great, now get in line, yellow belt," because he's still a yellow belt. And then she takes over the dojo, and she is season 4 of Cobra Kai because she's like, "We're going to be." We were basically taught until now that brutality is the only thing. It is possible to be brutally tolerant or peacefully savage, and that's just a line that I feel like is gonna be in season 4 of Cobra Kai.
Totally.
So the connection is palpable.
Yes, it's great. It's great. Cutting back real quick, I do love the back and forth when he has the bandage and he's saying that he sprained his wrist playing the guitar. And he's like, "Well, how are your chords and scales?" "Oh, they're very good. I could play songs very well." "What type of music?" "Soft rock." It's like, it's impossible to sprain your wrist by playing soft rock. But yeah, no, totally. The ending and kind of what they end on here, the idea at least, is totally what I feel like we're gonna get out of Cobra Kai season 4. So, love it. Love to see it. When I was watching this movie, because I hadn't seen it in a while, I messaged you because I was like, "Dude, I love this movie. It's so fucking good in my opinion." It's just like you said, it's not something like crazy, like I guess emotionally connecting, but that's kind of the point. Like it's the characters themselves barely connect emotionally, but it's just such its own vibe, and it's so funny and quotable. But I feel like there's. I mean, we've talked about it for an hour, so there's more below the surface as well. I just think it's its own. It's a nice, unique own thing, and I'm excited to see between the cast, like we mentioned, the guy that's in Many Saints in Newark, Jesse Eisenberg, Imogen Poots. Like if they do something like this, I'd love to see other stuff they do. And the writer director, I'm anxiously awaiting his new movie. So great stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And the final shot of the film is Casey standing in line with the other students as Imogen is, Anna is given this new spiel of how the school is going to change from here on out. And he's kind of smiling. And this is where I'm like, this is good, but it's also like, you're a murderer 2 times over. And the thing, like at the end of this, you're like, nice, now I can have a regular dojo, which is the thing you could have had from the start by going to any other dojo that wasn't full of murderers and not getting entrapped in this and going to the extreme so much with everything. Which is, I don't know, do you like, obviously this is an indictment of toxic masculinity and like taking all these stuff, cranking them up to 11 and just being reasonable in a sense, but do you take any other message from the film or sort of link up how the themes of the film connect, or just in general, what do you think is the point of the story besides the very obvious surface level, which is it's a very funny black comedy? And I feel like black comedies, things that are described to be in that genre, the endings are often like, whoa, it's like I don't know what to take from this exactly, because it's often pointing out the absurdity of like society. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's tough to say, like, because you're right, like where we end, because I mean he's killed a cop, he's killed Sensei. I mean he's essentially killed is it Thomas? Oh, no, I'm spacing on his name. With his dog, Thomas. Because I think they do cut to like him being dead, right? With the dog just kind of killing now. So, but the ultimate thesis still, I think, is what they land on. Even though he did all these things, it was like, I guess, a weird greater good thing, because the ultimate thesis of what they land on is more, I think, to focus on what Anna's saying, and her spiel is kind of what they, I think, what they want you to take away from it. And it's, I guess, it's kind of similar to what I was talking about at the start when we were just talking about like the idea of people bringing up toxic masculinity or exploring that a lot in movies or TV, is that I don't think it's necessarily like any type of masculinity is just automatically toxic. There's like a happy medium, or there's balance, if you will, balance, Danielson, that you can find. And sometimes maybe you have to go over the edge to defeat evil, because you would argue that guy killed the dog, he's evil. The other guy was a cop, he was evil. And not to go there, I know we got a fucking bad review for joking about that before. And also Sensei, I guess, could not be helped. At least that's what the thought was at this point. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, if you look at some of the things on paper, it's almost like going against what you think their takeaways are supposed to be. But I still think it's where what Anne is saying is what they're ending on. That's what they want you to take away from it.
Yeah, and it's like, obviously he's done horrendous things, but he has been also completely sucked into it by powers outside of his control, like these people who have already taken things to the extreme and are incredibly magnetic because of it, but in a dark and evil way. So they suck him in, turn other people into copies of themselves that spread violence. And it's not exactly, the point is not that we shouldn't have no violence. Definitely not, because we shoot someone in the head at the end and kill another guy with a dog. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, these sort of black comedy type films where like, because you're often left with a sense of like, what am I taking away from this? I enjoyed it, but what the fuck? And it completely depends on, does the comedy part of it click for you or not? And for me, it completely did, just like for you. So I highly recommend this film if any of this sounds interesting. I mean, we've spoiled it for you if you haven't watched it, but go check it out all the same. It's a solid movie. Any other finishing thoughts?
Well, I mean, if you're listening on the Cut to Black feed, if you have any interest in Cobra Kai, check us out on Cobra Kai. Wait, what is our Cobra Kai?
No Mercy, a Cobra Kai Kickback?
No Mercy, Cobra Kai Kickback. If you're listening to Cobra Kai, and you have seen The Sopranos or are thinking about watching The Sopranos, we do have Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit down. We've broken down every episode of The Sopranos, and then to an extension, some things kind of in the realm, like the discussion of this movie, Goodfellas, some James Gandolfini movies, and we're gonna keep on trucking. So check either of those out, and hopefully you're already checking out both.
Yeah, and you can find those, if you can't find them on your podcatcher because we messed up the names, you can go to showswhatyouknow.com. And we appreciate reviews left on both feeds. Thank you very much. And beyond that, I don't even know what to say at this point, Jim. What do we say beyond that? I think there's just one thing.
You know what? Fuck, we should talk about this beforehand.
Yeah, I think there's two things.
I think there's a thing. I don't know. I'm gonna try to lead this, and we'll see if this works.
Yeah,
because there's just like one idea to leave this on. It's strike first,
strike hard,
cut to black.